All right, so the webinar has started.
Okay, so welcome to the January 12th Board of Health meeting. And we will open the meeting with a roll call, but first I want to introduce Premila Nair, our new member, who brings a lot to the board. She's a nurse, and some of her assets is she has public health knowledge and has worked with community agencies in Springfield, and she's multilingual. So welcome, Premila.
Thank you.
And now I will do the roll call. So Premila,
Here.
Lauren,
Yeah.
Maureen,
Here.
Nancy, here. Tim is away and absent, and Jen is our staff member here. So the first item of business is reviewing the minutes from our December 8th meeting. And I just saw one typo.
I had something I wanted to correct as well.
I saw one typo under new business, and it was Tim's last name. It's Rad here instead of Grand here, or whatever it was written there. So that was a typo. I didn't see anything.
Oh, I
about
see
Tim.
that. Yeah. Then
Anybody else?
I saw something, correction, page 2 under item B, the second paragraph. It should be responsibility, not responsibly.
Oh, thank you. I
Yeah,
didn't
and-
pick that one up.
Yeah, and that sentence, I'm not sure if it needs to be retooled. There's a period after pollution, if it should be a colon. But it may be okay the way it is.
Okay, the way it is.
Okay.
Anybody else see anything? Maureen or Lauren?
No.
Can I have a motion to accept the minutes as presented with the typo corrections?
I'll move to accept the minutes of the December meeting with the corrections as mentioned.
Lauren, do you want to second it?
Sure, I'll second.
Okay, so all in favor, Lauren? Maureen?
Yes.
Maureen
Aye.
and Nancy, I. Okay, thank you. So now we have public comment. So is there any other, let's see.
I'm looking at the attendees and no hands
I'm
are up.
trying to get that. No hands are up. Okay. Attendees, let me see. Have all this stuff. Okay. Thank you. So the first old business was artificial turf. And I sent out the letters that we received from Kevin Collins regarding the artificial turf decision. And there's two things I want to just, because he was responding to the motion that we sent, our motion that we passed, that we sent to town councilors. And in it, we just said Massachusetts general law. So to clarify that, it's Massachusetts general law, chapter 111, public health. It has over 300 sections. So given that, I often refer to the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards, and they have a summary of their duties of local boards of health. And that's also used in our orientation material, and that was also used in the Department of Public Health orientation material. So just to clarify that, so it was chapter 111 and the duties that the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards has clearly delineated from those multiple sections of chapter 111. Does anyone else want to make comments before I make anything else? Did you, Maureen and Lauren, did you read Kevin's letter?
Yeah, I think part of that was like the question of who you reported this to and what we were asked to do and whether the Gazette got it right. And
Yes.
I'm not 100% clear on that myself.
Okay, Sean Magnano straightened that out because it was the finance committee of the town council, and it was the whole town council. And because we weren't at that meeting, we just got it via the regular communication loop that it got to Jen, and we were asked for our opinion. So when you look at it, it was the finance committee, but the whole town council was present, and it was asked for, and they asked for our opinion.
Okay.
So whether we say the finance committee of town council or the whole town council that was at the finance committee meeting, I don't know, because I wasn't there, and I didn't go back and view the whole video recording of the meeting.
Okay.
But Sean answered it and said, yeah, that's what happened.
Okay.
Does that help,
Mhm.
Lauren?
Oh, I really don't have much to say. I just know that they, in their statement, they said that they reviewed our motion or our opinion, but it really didn't seem to affect their vote.
Right.
So I don't really have much to say.
Right.
Okay.
And we used the Toxic Use Reduction Institute at the University of Massachusetts Lowell, and I did research on this. So the Toxic Chemical Reduction Act was passed in 1989 and went into effect in 1990. And it was really to prevent pollution of toxic chemicals, focusing primarily on manufacturers. And that act established the Toxic Use Reduction Institute at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. So the state formed TURI, the institute, to be consultants to, and I'll tell you, wait a minute, I wrote it down here. Oh, well, and their role, and I wrote everything down, I thought. The Toxic Use Reduction Institute provides resources and tools to help businesses, municipalities, and communities in Massachusetts find safer alternatives to toxic chemicals. And that was a lot of what we used, plus other research. And we used the precautionary principle. So I think that, I don't think we need to do any more. What are your other thoughts?
It didn't seem to me like there was anything to do with that.
Yeah. But because he asked for all these references and all that, and it was because it was a board motion, I felt I couldn't answer. I had to just use the board.
No, I agree.
I think that's all we have to do on that. And that can be reflected in our minutes, and people can go to our video recording. Okay, now I lose track of things. So that brings us to the toxic chemical regulation update. And I've gone in circles about this, and I know, Lauren, you have done a lot of work on this. So I went back to the beginning, and I've mentioned about this Massachusetts Toxic Use Reduction Act of 1990. And we have that, but then I thought, let's go back to the original motion for this regulation. So Jennifer nicely got out, and Nancy nicely got me the minutes. So February 12th of 2001, a resident, Deborah Krumbolz, who still lives in town, presented a draft of a brochure to the board. And the brochure was, "There's no place like a healthy home." And it's about using healthier products in the home. And she asked that we have a bylaw passed in the town by using healthier products to clean buildings and be presented to the spring town meeting. So then it went to Barry D. Castillo, who was our town manager back then. And he said he didn't think in bylaw incorporating the precautionary principle into town purchasing really was the way to go. And he asked that instead of a bylaw, he would like to see a regulation. So in April of 2001, we have the regulation that we have, with the aim of getting healthier products in buildings in town. So I think we have to wait until Tim comes, but I don't think we need this regulation. No other town in Massachusetts that I could find has this regulation. I asked Cheryl Sabara about it, and she said she didn't think anybody had this regulation. So I don't think we need this regulation. I don't know if people want to do more research on it or what their thoughts, but we need to hear here. But I think we should bring it up in our February meeting to just get rid of this regulation. What are your thoughts?
Well, I hope you can hear me well.
I am. Okay.
Yes.
I thought when you brought up revising the regulation, it was also to ensure that there was no toxic chemicals around like public buildings on the outside and in areas where children play. And so I know that Amherst like first at a lot of things, so I'm not quite sure why we would not go ahead with the regulation. Because I thought it was, like I said, to ensure the safety around areas where children are, and also toxic cleaning products or uses around public buildings. So I thought that was pretty important.
Well, we'll have to find out. The town possibly is doing that. We need to find out this. This goes back from a brochure in 2001. And no other town has this. I don't know if what products are used in the school is really our purview. I think there's a whole broader category with PFAS and all that, which would be a whole different regulation. What are your thoughts,
How so?
Lorraine?
Actually, I don't know. I don't know what's in the state law about toxic chemicals. Like you're saying, it's really focused on industry.
It is.
I know I looked, it's always the easiest way to figure out how to revise a regulation is to see what other towns are doing. And I agree, I couldn't find a one.
It's not a one.
And however, to encourage use of safer products in, for town of Amherst employees and buildings and whatever, I agree with Lauren. It seems like a good idea. I don't know the best way to encourage that or just to encourage that. I think I'm not sure what's been done over the years in terms of any kind of quote enforcement of these regulations. I would suspect very little, and it's kind of a hard thing to get a handle on.
So if we can't enforce
purchasing.
regulation, why, I think we could, and we could have Tim and Lauren contact the Toxic Use Reduction Institute at UMass Lowell and have them, because they're supposed to provide resources and tools to municipalities and communities and have them give us guidance.
Mike,
And that's,
that,
but I don't, you know, when I went back and traced it all goes back to there's no place like a healthy home brochure. And there's the minutes, Nancy, your minutes are great compared to these minutes. I'll hold them up to see if you can see them. It's like, we can't even see them. It's like a bullet. Precautionary principle, Ms. Cumbles presents a drafted brochure. And it's all, it's just like, book, and there's one sentence. So Nancy, you do a wonderful job on our minutes, so you can't really trace it. And
But
should it be a
the-
bylaw versus a regulation?
mhm.
Because no town in
But the
Massachusetts
two-
has this regulation. And it affects purchasing, which we don't have that much control over. So Jen, can you give us any help? Premila, do you have any ideas? I'm putting you on the spot.
Oh, Pramila, you're muted.
Yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
just saw that. So what I wanted to say was, you know, I don't know about the history of this except what you've just described, but it does make sense. And I have to say, I don't know whether it's the purview of the board in this town or not, but it does seem in general to make sense to have some statement about the use of toxic chemicals, preventing the use of toxic chemicals, just in terms of protection of employees
Right.
and the environment.
Mhm.
So we should find, Jen, is there any way to do research on what the town is doing about this?
Well,
Because it is this regulation that no one's enforced ever.
so I can say it's not enforced from what I'm aware of here in the health department. Never have I been consulted or asked about a regulation. But I can tell you, and this is information I spoke about before, when I spoke with Jeremiah LaPlante, who's the facilities maintenance manager, he said that they have these standards through, some are through state purchasing, that they have to use these green seal requirements. So these are green products and companies, and they list compliance and restrictions. So the MSD, the material safety data sheets, are all on file. So they really, you know, they really do strive to keep these things green. Purchasing, not so much the least toxic. That's not how it's stated on these on the sheets when you purchase.
So
So
it'd be
the
interesting to
procurement-
find out if Tory has approved what's being purchased.
Who, what?
Tory, the Toxic Use Resource Institute.
So I think it's, you know, regulated at a higher level, you know,
Mhm.
than us. You know, I sort of like, I don't know, Maureen or Pamela, you said it's a statement. I mean, it's not up to me, it's the board, but, you know, I can't see it sort of filtering through the health department. That's my worry, is the implementation.
Mhm.
And that's
Right.
mine too. If we have a regulation that we don't follow and we don't enforce, why do we have this regulation? And if no other town has this, and I'm not saying that safe buildings and safe products aren't an issue, but is that the way to address it? It might be, if we're concerned about buildings, you know, building maintenance and the school building maintenance and what they have. In the past, when use of Roundup has come up and we've traced it down, Roundup has hardly ever been used. It's been used, if I remember correctly, once on a patch of poison ivy at Groff Park and once up at Mill River on poison ivy when they tried hand removing and it grew back. But it was, you know, just so limited and very well used. And it was used because they thought of kids getting poison ivy was worse than using the chemical on the patch that was close to where kids were. And that was several years ago that was explored. Should we wait till February and ask Tim for his input? And if Jen, if you could check out how the chemicals and more about those green chemicals, and if it's gone through that TURI, the Toxic Use Resource Institute, that's the state level for making sure things are using safer alternatives to toxic chemicals. That's
Mhm.
their role.
Yeah, so I'd be glad to do that. I know there may be a wait. There's one or two people out right now, but I'll get
Mhm.
on.
Okay. But I don't say it's not important, but if we have a regulation that we don't follow, we don't enforce, we might want to, but it's really been going, PFAS has been going in town bylaws. Hasn't been going through health boards in Massachusetts.
Yeah. I'll be glad.
That's a whole other issue.
I just had a question about on the state level. I guess there's some things I just don't quite understand. But if the state is that a recommendation or is it a state regulation on toxic products, or what is considered a toxic product?
Yes.
Because
Oh,
there's local ways to give an expectation, or if there's no regulation, then that's kind of, to me, saying that there's no expectation of what the town is considered something that is toxic, something that is not, something that is not.
From what I found out, and Jennifer, you can add to this, the Massachusetts Toxic Use Reduction Act was really was developing a plan to prevent pollution with a primary focus on companies that use large quantities of specific toxic chemicals. Whereas the Toxic Use Reduction Institute, and we can ask for help from them, provides the resources and the tools to help us find safer alternatives to toxic chemicals. And if we found out that either one of them were approving things, then that would be the state's approval. So does that make sense, Lauren? There was this act that was put in place in 1990 that developed this institute, and that institute is to help companies, businesses, towns, and communities. Does that make sense to you, Lauren?
Yeah.
Okay. So that I think using the Toxic Use Reduction Institute would be our best bet in going forward with all of this. I think, and ask them, do we need a regulation?
You mentioned somebody mentioned the green guidelines to purchasing, and those are coming from the state. That's a requirement for all towns?
Yes.
When it's collective purchasing.
I believe so.
Yeah, so that's one way maybe the state is acting for local towns.
Yeah, so let me see what I can do. I mean, all these questions may be answered if I can.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
I think, Jen, if we can find out if the green items have been approved through TURI, that Toxic Use Reduction Institute, then we're okay.
Okay.
Or something like that.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
right. Yeah,
And then how does the town make these decisions, used in the parks and the schools and other buildings? It's to decrease exposure.
Okay.
Any other statements? People happy with putting that into February and getting more information?
Yes.
Okay, mental health awareness update.
So I asked to put this back on the menu because the menu, listen to me. Because when we spoke about it in December, I said I would check in with Northampton and see what they were doing around mental health. And I'm not sure if Lauren has anything else she wants to add, but I put this back on. So one of the things that Amherst has is we're involved with the Public Health Excellence Grant. It's shared services with Northampton. So it's the big grant looking at regionalization. So the nurses there who have come to Amherst and helped us out have educational programs. So they don't have anything about mental health. I called and spoke to them. They said they've identified mental health as an issue and are thinking about what they can do in the future, but they don't have anything now. So that's what I wanted to report back on. But the other thing I wanted to say is, I hope I don't meander too much, but Nancy, when you finish up the Town of Amherst Community Health Assessment, then there's a next step to it. It's like, what are we going to do with it? So I was thinking, and I don't know where we are going to land on this, but really maybe we need something, and this is public health and CDC, but like CHIP, community health implementation plans, sort of what are we going to do formally when we identify what the main issues are. So there's lots of program planning, the one that I've used in the past and I like is MAP. And what is MAP? Mobilizing action through planning and partnership. So I think what I really want to say is that I think there's going to be a lot of room for mental health awareness. That's a big thing that's been identified. So it may not happen now, we're in January, but I can see us starting to get going on this in end of March or April.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? Okay, so now we're going to go to new business.
Lauren has
Oh,
one.
Lauren, I can't see you. Okay, Lauren, what do you want to say?
I was that's kind of surprising that there isn't more services, or as you said, the through the Public Health Excellence Grant, that the different organizations that deal with social services don't have more educational and I guess just services that focus on mental health. But I was trying to focus my comments on some of the organizations that I looked up, which is NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Health and of Massachusetts, and someone got back to me and said to go to the Public Health Institute of Massachusetts.
You're fading, Lauren.
Oh, sorry. The Public Health.
Lauren, we're not hearing anything now.
She's muted.
Sorry, I think I muted myself. I tried to turn my camera off instead.
Okay. Now we can hear you nice and clear. Okay.
I wanted to mention the National Alliance on Mental Mental Illness, of Massachusetts. They reached back to me and they said that I could go to the Public Health Institute of Massachusetts reports and data for more information. And also I was looking at a Lancet study that was focused on climate anxiety. I thought that was interesting. Climate change is a topic that is, important to people in the town. And I had invited someone that's based out in Washington. Her name is Jasmine Pierre. But these are just, ideas that I have to address like particular topics on mental health. She has a app called The Safe Place, and I got that information from the UMass resource page for students on mental health. So I think there's a lot of information, and I think there's a lot of resources out there. So, I just think,
So
those are
Lauren,
some-
you are touching upon a very important subject. Mental health and mental health services locally and nationwide are severely lacking. We can't address this with a regulation, but we can move it for some implementation or something through CRES or through the health department. So that's going to be the place to put this. And I don't want to diminish the importance of it, because it is. And also, if we get more information from the community health assessment, that will help us do some identifications of implementation roles. So that's where it's going to be very important. So now we have to find the right place to put this. It won't come under a regulation for us, but it is part of the health of the community. That's very important. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, you said that. I believe the last meeting. I guess my confusion comes when the community or residents in the town bring forward a concern, or something that they want to see the town work on.
Tell them to write to the
how the-
board, tell them to write to the health department, so it comes to the board through channels like that.
Right, okay.
And if it comes in a written request, then the appropriate department will look at it. Is that correct, Jen?
Yeah, I think, I'm sort of thinking like in the spring, when we start bringing these subjects up, like, I don't want to misrepresent that we're not looking at mental health issues, because we are looking at depressions being tracked and suicide, and, Spiffy has stats on substance abuse that comes from mental health issues. So I think there's going to be real input. What I'd really like to see is a lot of input from the community. So Lauren, like you said, how do people, get involved in Amherst, the health department? Right now we're still in COVID, and we're sort of beginning to coast out of it. And it's been, it's a time for us to start thinking about other things. And mental health is a big thing post-COVID. So sometimes when people can email or talk to the health department, we're able to, it's sort of shovel ready. We can get out and help them right away with something. Someone had like a question about, teaching CPR to, the public, because they're worried about choking in restaurants. It's like, wow, that's a great idea. How can we work on that? So again, bring into the Board of Health meetings, email me, some things we can get going, some things we can start talking about. But Lauren, I look forward to working with you and other people on this. I think it's timing too. So I think 2 months from now, we're going to be in a different place.
Now I see that did we lose Scott?
No, Scott is here.
No.
Oh, good. Do I still see his name? Okay, so now I'm going to move on. So next, it's firearm safety overview. And I've invited Scott Livingstone to come and talk to us. With the increase of violent gun use, and this leads into mental health too, Lauren, I thought I'd like to have Scott tell us what steps are being taken on firearm safety in town, and what are the risks, because we want to prevent any risks. So if we can let Scott in and let him tell us what's being done. The last time he spoke to us was shortly after the Sandy Hook, and I was very impressed with what the police department was doing. So thank you, Scott. And if you can give us an overview of firearms in town, how people get them, what's being done for safety. I'd greatly appreciate that.
Sure. So thanks everybody for having me tonight, and hello. I think I know everybody here tonight. If I don't, come visit with me and have a chat, because I'm always available. So yeah, from a perspective, I'll start with a perspective of the town itself, our town. You know, we're relatively, actually, we're a very safe community, especially when it comes to gun calls. You know, I did a quick check this morning, and it's been pretty consistent. Like each year, we'll average around 100 calls that come up in our CAD system as gun related. Most of those, if not all of them, usually involve incidents around things like somebody heard a gunshot. It turns out not to be a gunshot. It turns out to be fireworks or something. Or we'll receive calls about complaints, mostly during the hunting season. Somebody will hear gunshots, not realize it's this deer season, or somebody will hear gunshots off in a distance and not realize some of the other hunting seasons are going on. So the majority of any calls that we get specific to gun complaints are related to things of that nature. We have very few gun calls where there's actually a shooting involved. Not to say we haven't over the years. You know, the calls that we do get for gun issues are usually after the fact, where an incident has happened and somebody's been assaulted with a gun, or somebody's pointed a weapon at somebody, and we follow up with those. And where necessary, criminal charges are brought. But overall, in the town of Amherst, very few incidents of weapons being used, specifically guns being used in the commission of any crimes and that sort of thing. When it comes to things like licensing for people, currently about 5% of our population have license to carry, which means they're legally allowed to have weapons in their homes or on their person. And so that comes out to about 15 or 100 so licensed individuals in the town of Amherst. That does not include students who don't consider Amherst to be their town, their residence town. I think most of you probably know that there are no weapons allowed on campus, even if somebody is licensed to be able to carry. If a student is, they're not allowed to have license or weapons on campus, even if they're legally licensed to do so. But if somebody's just renting up at, you know, Townhouse or one of the residential complexes, and they have a license to carry, we would not necessarily know that. So, you know, not a large number of people who are licensed in town. Again, about 1,500 total. One thing we don't have the ability to track, but the ATF, the federal ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms agency does, is if somebody has a license to carry, how many actual weapons do they have? You know, if they're a hunter, they might have 5 different types of shotguns. If it's just somebody who wants protection of themselves, we wouldn't necessarily know how many weapons are actually at each individual's home. You know, I think, Nancy, you had asked specifically about what we can do to ensure people are abiding by the law, that all weapons in your home have to be locked and secured. You know, that is a state law. It's also a federal law. Typically where we would see violations for something like that is if we're at somebody's home for another reason, for instance, a domestic disturbance or something of that nature, and then follow up with a report of a 209A violation, something of that nature. So we do not just go into somebody's home randomly. We don't have the authority, or you know, the US Constitution still, even if somebody's licensed, doesn't allow us to go into somebody's home to make sure that somebody's weapons are secure in their homes. You know, we do offer free locks to people who wants one. If somebody needs a lock to secure their weapons, we have the ability to give them those. But we don't go into individual homes, Nancy, to inspect, to ensure people are compliant with the law on that end. Interestingly, I think it was in this morning's news report, both in Mass Live. It was in the Boston Globe for sure, and the Boston Herald, but the new governor-elect Maura Healey is making gun safety and gun enforcement a priority of her new administration. She's going to actually, I think she's considering calling it a public safety or a public health issue. So I think you're going to see more discussion and conversation about the overall violations of gun safety and people who are in possession of handguns and handgun violence in general being more of the forefront of this administration. She's only been in office for a week and she's already discussing that. So that's a good thing when it comes to the governor's office. Trying to think, I wrote some notes here to what else maybe. Oh, as far as licensing itself, so it's pretty stringent. It's in the state of Massachusetts. We do a number of background checks for people who want to become licensed. It includes in-person interviews and then background investigations. We suspend a number of licenses if people are involved in domestic situations or are in violation of laws that are specific to handguns. I have the ability to suspend those licenses, and I've taken that action before. People do have the right to appeal to judges. I think this past December, I had 3 hearings before a judge for licenses that I suspended. So it happens. The good thing about that is, there's a mechanism for me to suspend licenses. And for those people who feel like they were treated wrongly, there's a mechanism for them to appeal that. And it's before a judge in a court of law. So it's pretty unique to Massachusetts that we have that ability to do. That's not something that's very, not many other states have that process involved in their licensing. So I've probably covered a lot of stuff already, but if there's questions, I'm happy to answer them for you.
Does anyone have a question for Scott? Maureen?
There was a change in the law, I guess sometime last year, where the applicant for a license no longer needs to have a special reason to need a gun. I wondered if that has changed anything in the number of licenses being sought or in your process as you evaluate those applicants.
We haven't, thanks for that, Maureen. We haven't seen a big uptick in the number of people that are applying for licenses. Usually when we see big upticks is when there's concern about a presidential change. And so in that 4-year cycle, a lot of things get written about the possibility that, a Democratic candidate is going to change the laws when it comes to being able to get a license, that sort of thing. So, but even in Amherst, we don't see a big change in the number of applicants. Again, though, our background investigations are pretty in-depth, not only in the state of Massachusetts, but here in Amherst. Again, we'll call an individual in for an in-person interview. And then the background follow-up is pretty intense before somebody is legally licensed to carry.
Thank you.
Pramila?
Maybe I should know this, but I don't. Does a license pertain to only one weapon or any number of weapons? Is the number of weapons stipulated, I guess?
So no, there's no regulation on the number. There are regulations on the type of weapon that, whether, you can't get a machine gun or an automatic firing license. That involves a federal license in order to get one. So even I can't issue those to people. So it's more the type of weapon, not so much the number of weapons.
So with a license, you could, as long as it was a type that was allowed, you could have any number of weapons, theoretically.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And, sorry, I think I missed from the beginning of your comments. If you want a license, you have to go through the police department.
Hi, Lauren. Yeah, that's correct. So in Massachusetts, the licensing authority are the individual police chiefs in that community. So there's every now and then there's discussion about changing that law, but nobody really wants to take that burden on. I know there's a lot of police chiefs who would like to give that up, but there's really no other entity that's looking to fulfill that role or take the responsibility and the liability, because when I sign off on an individual license to carry, that liability really does fall on me. You know, if something were to go wrong and we miss something in a background investigation and then something bad were to happen with that individual, that liability would fall on me and the town of Amherst.
I have a question, with all these crazy mass shootings, is there anything that the board can do to help you to increase gun safety and decrease risks?
Yeah, I think it's going to be important, Nancy, to follow what types of information is going to come out from the governor, because she's making this a priority. And she's going to be looking for input from town managers and health departments. And, some of the areas she's looking at to do more work is in the mental health field, right? There aren't enough mental health workers. And, it's not, and everybody reads the news, and it's not, in almost every case in these incidents of mass shooting, there's been red flags. Somebody should have picked up something somewhere along the line. And it's consistent with almost all of the people involved in these active shooting situations where, somebody was seeing a mental health professional, but they weren't able to see them, or, it almost always falls back into mental health issues. And I don't think I can tell you that we as a state and we as a country are not doing enough to serve those individuals that are struggling with mental health issues. There's another area, and I don't know how we're going to fix this. And it is something I wanted to bring up tonight, but when it comes to licensing individuals to have ownership of weapons, I think we do a good job with that. There's new things coming out line up now that where people can make their own guns by ordering things online. They can order, a barrel for a weapon in Romania and have that shipped to their house, and they can order triggering mechanisms. So and these are called ghost guns. So there's no way of tracking them. And I happen to think that that's going to become the biggest problem in the country in the years down the road, when people are actually, finding that ghost guns were involved in the commission of crimes and that sort of thing.
Are you aware of any ghost guns being put together in Amherst?
I'm not, we haven't come across them yet. And it's relatively a new phenomenon. But, we're hearing little reports. In England, there were a couple that were used by terrorist organizations, and they got hold of the weapons and found that they were ghost guns. So, they're out there. It's new, but it's something that people could have access in doing in the future.
At your last visit to us about 10 years ago, I know you discussed how you work with UMass, Amherst College, and Hampshire College, that you're away in case there's a mass shooting. Can you just tell everybody how you work together? Because I found that reassuring to know that that was in place. And I'm sure lots of people question about schools and the safety for that. So if you can just tell us what you're doing to increase safety and decrease risk, which I know I was impressed on how the police department seems to be handling this.
Yeah, it's one thing as the police chief, I'm very, very proud of with our agency, active shooter training. We conduct our own training to anybody who wants it, including all the schools. We have very specific policies with all of the schools about how to react to dangerous situations. And as a matter of fact, we did one today at the high school where officers were over there And it was more of a refresher course because we have new officers in the agency, excuse me, and they have new employees every year in the school district. So, we hadn't done a refresher course since before COVID. So we did one today at the high school. We'll be following up with all of the schools in the next month or so. Typically, we'll do them over the winter breaks or spring breaks so that we can get a large group of people together when the schools aren't being used. But yeah, we have very specific policies, and we include the University Police Department, Amherst College, our fire department are all involved in our tabletop exercises. You just can't do enough of this training, and I'm proud to say, very adept at the training. We take it very seriously. Again, we have officers that are specifically trained in Alice and Asher training. We give trainings to other communities because we're so good at it. Sergeant Todd Lang is now overseeing that. He used to be Lieutenant Brian Johnson. He has since retired, but we do active shooter training for the library. We did it for town hall. We've done it for the DPW. Anybody who's got the Bang Center, anybody where the public congregates and has people who have free access to a building, we'll do trainings for them. So, but yeah, as we speak, we're doing refresher courses with all the schools.
Thank you. That's good to know.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I see that we are looking at safety, increasing it and decreasing risks. And if there's anything we can do, watching what's coming out of the governor's office. But thank you very much, because as the numbers kept increasing last year,
Yeah.
I kept saying it would be good for the board members and for town to know all that you are doing for this.
You're very welcome, Nancy. And, I'm happy to come back anytime.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye, Jen. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Okay. That was helpful. Next, does anyone want to make any other comments? Next on the agenda are the geothermal well applications. And now, I did a little research today on this, and the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection in 2013 developed guidelines for ground source heat pump wells. Those are the geothermal wells. And the purpose of us having us to do this is we want to know the location of the geothermal wells and to make sure that they are installed properly. And these guidelines recognize the environmental benefits associated with geothermal wells as heat sources. It decreases air pollution, and they want to make sure they're properly installed. And in doing that, Ed Smith, who couldn't be here, goes over and gives the permit. He reviews how it's going to be in place, the well drillers name, and that they're certified. And then he also checks with the wetlands administrator to make sure that there's not going to be any pollution. And we have 3 permits before us today, but only 2 have been cleared by Aaron Jack at the wetlands administrator, and that's 554 Station Road and 34 Berkshire Terrace. So those are the only 2 that we'll be voting on tonight. And 648 Station Road will move to February and make sure that the wetlands administrator okays that well. Jen, I don't know if you have any other input on this, but I think we can just vote on these because they've gone through all the safety checks. And the main thing is for us to know where they are and to make sure that they are installed properly and with Ed's review, and then they're reviewed while they're being done and after they're done. Questions from anybody? I know, Lauren, you always have questions. So that's why I went through and looked at all this today. Does this make sense to you, Lauren?
I know they're on private land, and so I really don't have a preference or an objection. So I just, yeah, I still don't quite know, why the board, I know other boards and committees, they do like site tours and stuff like that, but since it's on private land, I guess that makes the difference, or, I just really don't have an objection.
Okay.
But
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on these two geothermal wells that we're going to vote on?
No, I looked through the documents from the company Dandelion and also Ed's letters of support, and they all seem to follow the guidelines we've been seeing over the last several months with this recent increase in proposals. So they seem to meet the guidelines. I wasn't, we don't have, it doesn't say that it's been approved by wetlands anywhere, but good to know that
but
it is.
It is, and that's why I'm not having a vote on one, because it has not been approved by wetlands yet. It's there to be approved, so that's why we're not
Right.
voting on.
And I guess from my reading, that those 2013 guidelines are a little more strict than they were actually amended in 2017
Yeah.
to be less stringent on these closed loop systems that don't interchange any solutions or water with what is in the ground. So it just goes down in a pipe, goes up, and then comes back up in the pipe, and it also supposed to stay in the pipe.
Right.
So that's, making sure that these people are doing it, know what they're doing, and they're approved well drillers and all of that, and they're in the right places, and they're not going to cause harm to
Right.
wetlands or public or access of water or sewer or whatever else. I feel comfortable voting on these.
Okay, so should I make the motion? Or would you like to make the
I
motion?
have a question.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. So the extent to which a decision is made about whether the wells are installed properly sounds like it hinges on the person or the company doing the installation having a license. That's
Yes.
okay. And I was just curious about if requirements are met. I'm wondering why this is a Board of Health issue.
Because wells and septic systems come under the Board of Health, and we want to know where these are located,
Okay.
and that they're installed properly.
Mhm.
We, in previous meetings, have discussed whether these very straightforward closed loop geothermal wells need to come in front of the board, or whether Ed could have a set of criterion in which he could follow and approve basically on his own, but we haven't gotten that far.
We're moving there.
All right, yeah. I'm just
Yeah,
reading the
and
material.
it had been kind of a mood issue. There was a little bit of a flurry of these about 2010, 2012. And then there weren't very many being installed, but just because of environmental issue consciousness, the higher prices of other sorts of heating and heating fuels, that there's been a substantial increase in these permits requests in the
And
last 6 months.
Yeah.
And environmentally, they're better for the land and the property, because they decrease air pollution from gas and oil, so that they are unless we find anything different environmentally, they're the better way.
Well, I looked at the
Or
materials
eaten.
submitted and 2 out of 3 seemed completely approved, which is why I asked the question if they
Yeah.
were meeting all the criteria. Anyway, I get it.
Right. You're right to ask that question.
Yes. Yeah, your learning curve. And you're dark, so I can't see when you raise your hand. So I'm sorry if
I'm
so
sorry.
just holler out if I skip over you.
Okay.
The pictures on my screen are small and dark right now. So we need a motion to approve the geothermal wells at 544 Station Road and 34 Berkshire Terrace. Should I make the motion? Maureen, do you want to make it?
I can make the motion.
Okay.
I move to approve the geothermal wells at 554 Station Road and at 34 Berkshire Terrace.
A second? We want to second it, Premila?
Sorry, I keep forgetting that I'm muted.
Oh, okay, I see your head.
Yes, yes, I second it.
Okay, so motion's been made and seconded, and now all in favor, Premila,
Aye.
Maureen,
Aye.
Lauren?
I still abstain.
She abstains, and Nancy, aye. Okay, so that has been moved and passed. Next on the agenda is the director's update.
All righty. So I sent out to you all and on the Board of Health webpage where you can get the packet, we have the COVID case count.
Yeah.
And as we've been saying for quite a while now, that these are not indicative of the actual caseload of COVID. We just don't have the surveillance like we used to. Right now, we're seeing 21 active cases, and the 14-day incidence rate, which I always have liked because it's per 100,000, was 7.3 last week. And I just want to compare that to where we were a year ago. And last year at this time, we had 320 active cases and the incident rate was 191. So from some 9.3 last week, last year it was 191.
Wow.
So obviously the case numbers, we're expecting some kind of little bump or surge this year, but we're seeing nothing like we did last year. So I do want to just point out that I don't think it's written anywhere, but we've had a total of 62 deaths in Amherst. And I think that's something that we really need to think about at some point. I don't know, plant a tree or do something for these folks. Ages approximately between 35 and 100 years old, 62 deaths. So that's a number we can think about. So just talking about the different variants, one of the websites I like to go to is the CDC and the COVID data tracker. So there you can monitor the different variants. And so the dominant variant in Northeast right now is the XBB.1.5 or XBB.1.5. It's 72% of what's circulating in the Northeast. In the US, it's 27.6. Variants are always changing and accumulating mutations in their genetic code. You just don't really know what's going to take hold and what isn't. But we definitely have seen more transmissibility with this. It's more immune evasive, more cases. And there's still some question if it's going to be as severe as some of the other variants. But I will just also remind us that we still have deaths daily. The 7-day average and confirmed case counts of deaths is 14 in Massachusetts. That's still a high number. That's about 550 daily cases per day nationally. And when you multiply that out, that's much higher than where we would be in a normal flu year. So just want to talk about that. So we don't follow the case counts as closely, but we do, as I always say, have the wastewater from BioBots, and we post that onto the town webpage. You also can find BioBot on the Massachusetts DPH interactive website. And you can see that we have had a little bit of a bump, but the case virus concentration is decreasing right now. And just always precaution in interpreting those results. It doesn't actually translate into actual cases. Someone can have a higher viral load than somebody else, but that's a really good tool. And it's one of the public health tools that we have here in Amherst, and we monitor that. We get 3 samples a week and we post them up. I wanted to talk about the other things that are circulating. We have the flu and the RSV. The flu was elevated. It started out of the gate pretty high and fast, and now it's kind of leveling off. RSV, I believe, also had higher numbers, and they're leveling off here in Amherst as well as nationally. But still, people are getting really sick. I just was speaking to a friend of mine today who had the flu and said he had a fever of 102.6, and he was really sick for 2 weeks. So just to let people know that even though there are all these 3 different viruses circulating, that the sort of encouraging news is it's the same behaviors that we have, the same tools to help fight these. So get vaccinated with the flu and with COVID, and I'll go over the booster. There's no vaccination for RSV yet. Use rapid antigen tests for COVID. We just got a new batch in the Amherst Health Department. So we have like 20,000 new kits, and they expire at the end of June. So June 2023. Yeah, those are out now. There are also ways to test for the flu and for RSV. And there also are treatments for flu and COVID, but not RSV. Paxlovid is still working very well, even with the XBB.1.5. There is some sort of questions people have about having rebound, and also if you have some kind of contraindications with meds about not taking it. But I would just say, if you have COVID, check in with your practitioner. It's a really good underutilized medicine. I would take it in a minute. Would you take it, you guys, Maureen, as a physician?
I would. I would.
I would.
And as an NP, Premila, do you have any thoughts?
No, I know that there's this risk of rebound and so on, and for that reason that it's controversial, but no, I mean, I think overall the potential benefit outweighs the risk, so.
Yeah.
And there's rebound without that Paxlovid, even with
Sure.
regular, if you don't treat it, the risk of rebound is not that different. There's some new information suggesting that.
Jen, I wondered if the influenza here has been primarily influenza A?
I don't have that, and I think I could find it out. I think it would be
I-
on the dashboard. Yeah.
I think
know
it has so far.
DPH has a really good flu influenza dashboard. It's new this year, I believe, and interactive. It's very good. So the bivalent vaccine, it's still effective against the XBB.1.5. I think it was manufactured from the BA.2. The actual virus comes from the BA.2 strain, but the boosters from the BA.5, but there's still some antibodies that you can have from this current bivalent vaccine. So it's still really worth getting this vaccine, and it's just grossly underutilized. It's just the rates are kind of, you can almost say abysmal. 63% of the Americans have not had the recent bivalent booster. Yeah, so we here in the health department are continuing with our vaccine clinics. We're going to be doing them as office hours every Thursday, 12 to 2, but we're also introducing, starting February, every Wednesday, 3 to 5 o'clock, we're going to be having another booster clinic, and we're going to be having 5+. So we can get children, we'll have Pfizer, we'll have Moderna. So that's something that we'll be able to offer. And then I read something that Moderna is having better effects on the strain, but I just think we should wait and see if that's actual, let that sort of flesh out a little bit more, because now sort of people are beginning to talk up that that's actually not the case. So I think just the bottom line is just to get that booster. It's really very helpful. Let's
Test kits for the test kits that you received, are they for distribution to the public?
Yeah, so I'm going to hold one up. So this is the iHealth. So we're getting these, and we have, 10,000 of these ready for distribution. And what we've done in the past is they've been here in the Bang Center, but also we've done a big campaign to distribute them to some of our different organizations in town, so it can really be sort of more equitable. So they go to the Amherst Survival Center. We've distributed them to the Family Outreach of Amherst. We've gone to Places of Faith, Craig stores. So we really try to get them out there. If we've missed anyone in the past, please give us a call. We really want them in people's hands and getting
Are they
used.
sent out through the schools at all?
So they've had their own supply. They're not going to be getting them through the state
Okay.
this round, but we're going to be sharing some of ours to give to the schools. So I think that's what I have just sort of for the regular COVID. And then I just have a few other little things. So this is something I'm sort of interested in. We all should be, but January 26th, there's an advisory committee, the CDC, it's the Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee, meeting January 26th. And at that time, they're going to be talking about the future of vaccination regimens. So we've been getting a lot of questions about if there's going to be a new booster, or if people can get a second booster. So that's something that we can all be looking forward to see if they come up with anything. And then I'm always interested in long COVID. There's a new vaccine. There's a new article out from JAMA. Azzolini is the principal investigator, came out at the end of December, but that vaccines are helping. Let me read the summary really quickly. It's a longitudinal observational study, so with real people, saying that 2 or 3 doses of vaccine compared to no vaccine is associated with lower long COVID prevalence. So anyhow, I'm happy to hear that. 2 other things, just to let us all know that we had a tobacco compliance check through the Pioneer Valley Tobacco Compliance Committee, and that Amherst, we had no sales to minors. So that's great news. Good for us. And then something that I just got in the mail today, this is from Joe Comerford, and it's Bill H.5103, and it's about bikes. So people may have known this already, but there is some new legislation saying that looks at different things with safety around bikes. So this addresses safe passing, for example, that motors have to give a wide berth, not less than 4 feet when passing a vulnerable road user is called, so a wheelchair or a bicycle, and that cyclists need to have a red light on that back of their bike. So anyhow, that's my update.
Okay, we're going to have public comment, and under topics not anticipated by chair, I am going to make a mention about Zero Waste Amherst. But before I do that, is there anyone who wants to make a public comment? Please raise your hand. Okay, so I want to mention that Zero Waste Amherst is collecting data via survey, and you got a message about that, and that we need to encourage people to provide, answer that survey so that they have good data to improve waste and compost collection here in Amherst for the health and well-being of our community, and also possibly save some money. And also Jen sent out, we all have to take a conflict of interest training, and Jen sent that email out so that if we can get it done in the next month, that would be good. And does anyone else have any other comments? Questions?
Nancy, did you say something about the time of the Board of Health changing?
Oh, no, thank you. Premila. Thank you. I didn't write it down. I had it in my head and then I forgot it. So Premila works until 5 o'clock and she can speak to this. So we're asking if we can move the Board of Health meeting till 5:30. Do you want to say anything, Premila?
No, just that it takes that long to get from Northampton back to Amherst if I'm lucky. And
Yes.
you know, if it's inconvenient for others, I'm happy to stay at work and attend the meeting, but
Well, the meeting used to be at 7 o'clock, so we moved it to 5 to make it better. So does anybody have any thought about moving it to 5:30, or would that be an okay time for people? Maureen?
I'm fine with that.
Lauren?
I'm fine. That's fine.
Okay, well, then we'll move it to 5:30. So we can get that out. We'll have to get that message out to Tim. So Premila, I hope that makes life easier for you and the commute is quick.
very much appreciated.
Okay, so, and thank you, Jen. I had that in my head, but if I don't write it down, I lose part of things I have in my head. So if without anything else, may I have a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn?
Before we adjourn, I had a question. I don't know if we could have done it.
Oh, wait a minute, I can't hear you. Keep leaning for, can't hear you, Lauren.
Will my comments, and can I send the Lancet climate anxiety study to the board to
Sure.
be in? Okay.
Sure.
I moved to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, may I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. And I want to just say thank you, Nancy Schroeder, for taking such good minutes. And to adjourn the meeting, Lauren,
Yeah.
Premila? You're muted, Premila.
Yes.
Okay, Maureen
Yes.
and Nancy, yes. And thank you, Jen, for all your help and support. And we'll see you at 5:30 on February 9th.
I'm just finishing the Board of Health meeting, so, no, yeah, okay.
Bye, Jennifer. Bye, Nancy.
Bye. Have a good month, everybody. And Premila, don't hesitate to ask any questions if you need any more information.